that I may also fellowship in his suffering. Suffering is suffering ikhona ngendlela ezitshiyeneyo. I think it's not a proper gospel. Masingakhulumanga ukuthi you can be exposed to suffering. You can find yourself suffering. Now suffering is in different ways. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 21. Peter khuluma suffering, but then we have to fellowship and follow in the steps of Christ. But then when we talk about fellowship in his suffering, Jesus suffered at all levels. He suffered physically. He was wounded. He was bruised. And then he suffered emotionally. He was insulted. He was belittled. He was spat on. He was ridiculed. He was looked at with cynicism. He suffered all that. And then he suffered spiritually. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was tempted, when he went through all that pain of spiritual suffering, the Bible says when he prayed there, the beads of perspiration were like blood. Amen. But Paul ubuyathina futhi ku Philippians chapter 3 verse 7. Paul uphinda khulume ngenye suffering, financial suffering. Ubuyakhulume ne financial suffering Paul. Paul, let me just read it for you. Philippians chapter 3 verse 7. I'll read it in the Amplified Version. But whatever former things I had that might have been gained to me, I have come to consider as one combined loss for Christ's sake. Gamanyama version, so Paul because of this gospel of Christ, because of the sake of Christ, I have lost everything. So in other words, sometimes the gospel heads us into a place where we lose everything. But when we also look at Paul, the physical suffering, we are reminded of Paul and Silas, missionary journey, when they were put to prison after being subjected to a number of lashes. We also reminded of Paul being shipwrecked in Malta. We also remember him also talking, many times I have been stoned, many times I've been done this. So he went through a lot of physical suffering. He went through a lot of suffering in the physical. But then also when we look at financial suffering, Paul 2 Corinthians chapter 6, I think it's verse 9 to 10, where Paul says, I will spend and be spent gladly for your own sake. So he says, Paul, to me, finance does not matter. To me, what matters is you attaining the glory of heaven. For me, what matters is not the money that is all around, but mine is to make sure that you see heaven. He says, I will spend. I will gladly spend. By the way, God loves a cheerful giver. That's why Paul says, I will gladly spend. I will gladly spend and be spent. So he's saying, I will be glad when I spend for the gospel of Christ. Can I see those who are very happy when they spend for Christ? I said, Amen. Now, how do I respond? Now, number one, trust in God. I'm suffering, going through suffering will help you to trust in God. When we go through stuff, when you go through stuff, trust the Lord. Maybe you can compare Job chapter 2 verse 9 and Job chapter 13 verse 15. Or Job chapter 2 verse 9. The wife of Job says to Job, you are beyond the repair. Curse your God and die. So he gives an attitude that is prevalent in most of the Christians. When they go through suffering, they curse God and then they die. Amen, Bazalwa. So when some people go through suffering, they curse God and then they die. How do they die? Spiritual death means you are separated from God, because at your time when you went through stuff, when you went through suffering, instead of you following and listening to what Scripture says, you cursed God. Amen. How do you curse God? You can curse God with your mouth. You can curse God with your actions. You can curse God with the stuff that you go to. You can curse God by visiting some occult, by visiting some demon elsewhere, and by receiving stuff. When you go through suffering, the wife of Job says, curse God and die. Into enhle ikuthini? Ukuthi umama lo uyakwazi ukuthi xa ungakhesa uNkulunkulu kwenzakalani. Uthi curse and die. Into ekhona ke ukuthi esiKristwini sethu sanamuhla baningi abahlela enkonzweni namhlanje kuseni abamkhesileyo, ngesaba ukuthi abamthukileyo. Amen. Kanje ukukhesa sokuthu yikuqalekisa ngithi. Yeah, live right into ukuqalekisa is strong enough. Ngoba ukuthuka is not strong enough. So baningi abantu abamqalekisileyo uNkulunkulu. Bayihluleka ukuvuka. Amen bazalwane. Baningi abantu abamqalekisileyo. They've cursed God. Bayazama ukuvuka. But when you curse God, it's not easy to turn around. So unkosikazi kaJob uthi khona nxa sesidlula phakathi kwenhlungu ezingaka akhona ama-response, ikhona i-response easy way out. There are people that have taken easy way out. There are people who have sold their souls when things went tough. There are people that have sold their bodies when things went tough. There are people that sold their allegiances when things went tough. There are people that sold their hearts when things went bad. There are people that sold stuff about them when things were not good. So when we come to church, we are talking to people that have gone through lots of things, people that have sold their integrity, people that have sold everything, people that have thrown away to the dogs what mattered most to them because they were going through difficult times. Amen, bazalwane. Angazi ukuthi wena ulahleke, angazi ukuthi wena umthuke ngani, but unkosikazi kaJobe uthi yena mthuka uNkulunkulu ufe. But then uJob abesephendula ku chapter 13, khona lapha ku verse 9, uJob uyaphendula uthi ngize lapha ngizophindela ngise. But then impendulo engitholayo mina engithandayo engijabulisayo iku verse 15 of chapter 13, where Job says, though he slay me. My goodness me, let's go to Job chapter 13 verse 15. I want to end there, but I can't end today. Amen. Hallelujah. I said amen, brother. Job chapter 13. I'm interested in verse. See, with these gadgets of these days, it's easy to open. Mangakwazi ukuthi uJob ungapi. Lapho uyamthola very fast. uJob use just ngamu